Hey guys. So this lesson is one I wanted to do for a while to express my fascination with the beautiful yet potentially dangerous beliefs around soulmates and twin flames. There's a lot of misinformation out there that kind of complicates our understanding of these ideas, influencing modern day relationship challenges. It's created this dichotomy of wanting to avoid the discomfort these challenges bring and our fundamental need for belonging. This dichotomy is one of the drivers behind the epidemic of loneliness that is worsened by overpopulation and technological advances to a point so severe that the World Health Organization has declared it a public health threat. A recent poll by the American Psychiatric Association found that 30% of adults feel lonely every week and 10% feel it daily. This widespread disconnect highlights the crucial need for love and belonging in this world. Our pursuit of pleasure through impersonal means like pornography, robotics, and AI is becoming excessive. Which actually rewires our brains on how we connect emotionally to each other, that we're losing the very essence that fuels courage, hope, and love. In 1850, Alfred Lord Tennyson wrote, "It is better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all." Fast forward to 2024, it is now would be written, "It is better to run from love than risk losing it." People often find themselves caught between fear and desire, running from what they ultimately seek. Those brave enough to love face their own battles, sometimes fighting for it all the wrong reasons or with the wrong person. So instead, we rely on stories to make sense of the world, using narratives to fill voids and ease the discomfort of uncertainty. These stories, whether rooted in science or spirituality, heavily influence our actions and beliefs. As beliefs grow and more people seek it, it outweighs any logic, fact, or even rational idea. And when that belief is to support love, well, that combination might just be the most powerful thing to humankind. That is why the belief of soulmates has stood the test of time. It is based on the idea that there's one special person meant just for you, a love so profound that it survived every life prior to this one and will continue in the afterlife. Now, the concept of twin flames, however, is a newer idea, coined in 1970 by Elizabeth Clare Prophet, who discussed it in her book, Soulmates and Twin Flames. The difference between a twin flame and a soulmate, according to Prophet, was that these are two souls born together from the white flame created by God and are destined to find each other to complete some important mission in their lifetime, to change the world in some way better while experiencing personal growth and transformation. However, today's version of twin flames has changed dramatically and reflects more of a karmic relationship. A karmic relationship is usually described as the opportunity for resolving past life debts with another person and learning a lesson that we did not complete in the previous lives that is now playing out in our current lives. Now, to say that with both of these concepts that they may not be romantic connections, but in relation to this lesson, I will only be focusing on the romantic aspect of it because that's where specifically these lines get blurred. The misconceptions around these narratives is that like twin flames is not an ancient belief, as I mentioned, though despite most sources are saying that it is. Now, soulmates are. However, both reference the same origin story between these two concepts, and Prophet's book is actually rarely mentioned. Now, as for myself, I do believe in soulmates. However, how I define soulmates is not in alignment with one person for one person. As for twin flames, I'll admit I'm a little bit on the fence about this. So I'm going to kind of say maybe. It kind of depends on which narrative surrounding the concept could possibly be true, if it can even be so. But the point is that these concepts are beliefs. Now, there's no direct, what most would call scientific evidence to prove that either of these concepts can exist, despite some claiming that there is. Now, there has been some studies done around the soulmate concept, but only in relation to monogamy or psychology and the dangers it brings into relationships. But that's not to say that there can't be scientific evidence. I mean, I personally believe that beliefs stem from some source of truth. It may not be a definitive truth or accurate, but there's some element to every story that contains a seed of truth. It just needs to be watered. With this lesson, let's start with the basics and the science around monogamy, which is rooted in these belief systems. While some credit the formal concept of monogamous marriage to ancient Greece, significant influences also came from other cultures and religions such as Christianity. However, the notion of one love for one person can be traced back even further to Hindu scriptures. It is theorized that humans were originally polygamous, a trait shared with many mammals and likely inherited from our ape ancestors. While there's no direct record, such as a Dear Diary from ancient times, to exist to confirm this, there are also multiple scientific hypotheses of why we would have evolved into monogamy. Most of the hypotheses revolve around resources, such as Lovejoy's hypothesis that argues that we became monogamous because males provided food for females in exchange for mating exclusivity, pretty much like taking a woman out to dinner and then getting laid afterwards. Or when resources became defensible by a single pair, they would team up and then it would be for the offspring survival. Another was a female spacing hypothesis that suggested monogamy arose simply because females occupied larger territories to gain access to scarce resources, making it difficult for males to monopolize multiple females. I guess no one was walking 500 miles back then unless they were ancestors of the proclaimers. Now, there's also the male parental care hypothesis and cooperative breeding hypothesis. It's involved this need to form these bonds to parent together because of the energetic demands that it takes to raise a child. And this is expanded into the embodied capital theory, suggesting that it also involves skills and knowledge needed to pass down to our offspring. Of course, there's also the theory that it had to do with the survival of genetics, that the males wanted to make sure that their offspring was theirs and it survived. And lastly, there's also the pathogen stress hypothesis that suggests monogamy evolved simply due to limit the spread of sexually transmitted infections. But what is the one thing that's missing out of all of these hypotheses? Love. The closest theory in relation to this is the pair bonding hypothesis, which relates to the strong emotional bonds to hormones like oxytocin and vasopressin, which are released during intimate, physical, and social bonding experiences, which is how love is explained on the biological level, which assumes that our primal species and our ancestors were not motivated by love or spirituality. Yet myths surrounding ancient civilizations would say otherwise. And it was the famous Greek philosophers that put the romantic concept of love, which was discussed through Plato's Symposium. I mean, when talking about love, we're really delving into one of the humanity's most studied yet mysterious subjects. Of course, there's been a tremendous amount of research around it, and scientists try to decode what it is, how it works, and why does it affect us so profoundly. From a biological standpoint, we know that love involves the complex of interplay, neurotransmitters, hormones, and molecules. But if we only view love through the lens of biology, we risk missing the broader picture. Philosophers have pondered love's deeper significance, debating its roles in human experience and its connection to our very essence. I believe love is not just some physical or explainable thing. It actually transcends that. I feel like it's more about something ethereal, more connected to the soul or high consciousness elements that our current scientific understanding struggles to fully grasp. While our bodies may respond to love in measurable ways, the experience itself, the connection, the depth of feeling is something so special and beautiful, it often defies explanations, hinting at a deeper connection woven into the fabric of our single existence. I mentioned in my last lesson that I've struggled with understanding what love is on a human level. I question it because how I perceive love should be is not what I've experienced or witnessed in childhood or even adulthood. It's a bit of an enigma for me because I should be jaded or fear it based on my upbringing and past relationships, but I don't, and I never have. Actually, I became the exact opposite of what I experienced. And there's some theories around this phenomenon for some people that do become this way. There's the resilience theory that we resist what we experience, and the compensation theory where we develop traits or behaviors as a way to compensate for or react against the past negative experiences to make sure that we don't repeat what we were subjected to. And then there's the positive disintegration theory, which suggests that some who experience significant psychological turmoil and anxiety use these experiences as catalysts for advanced personal development and often results in higher levels of empathy and a strong sense of personal ethics. So if I had to choose a theory, this would be the one that lines up most with my personality. But even if that is the reason, it still doesn't explain why I was born with this capacity for love. Growing up, of course, I wanted my knight in shining armor to come and rescue me from the pain I was experiencing and the loneliness I was feeling. But as I grew older, I realized no one's going to save me other than myself. I've always taken love very seriously, and I've always been loyal to it, even as a child. I mean, I was very picky about my celebrity crushes growing up, and I never cheated on them. I didn't even look at other celebrities because that was the person I was obviously going to end up marrying, and I wasn't willing to jeopardize that. However, my view wasn't idealistic either because I did believe even as a child, relationships take work. And no challenge was too great to get through because in the end, love conquers all. And of course, there's an irony of this because it is stated in some spiritual practices that we actually choose the name before we come into this life to represent us. My grandmother named me, and she got my name from the Bible. Now, when you hear the name charity, you most likely think of donating to the poor. But the meaning of charity actually evolved from its original meaning, which was love. 1 Corinthians 13 is referred to the love chapter of the Bible. But back in the day, it did not now abideth by faith, hope, and love, these three, but the greatest of these is love. It actually said the greatest of these is charity. And that's what I was named after. The representation of who I am is love within itself. But what has changed over the years is my belief around soulmates. Now, I mentioned in my last video, I'm a line 6 in human design, and all line 6s have this natural desire to believe in soulmates, and they spend their life searching for theirs. And I did. for a long time until I fell for the wrong guy. And I'm not referring to my ex-fiancés or anybody that I've discussed in these videos thus far. Now, I've said I love you to 3 men in my life, and I take those words very seriously. I will not say them until I can promise that love unconditionally. Meaning, if I say those words, it is me saying to them, I am going to lay down my life for you and I will never leave you. That promise would only get broken because something must have happened to outweigh that love. And trust me when I say I put up with a lot of shit before it reaches that level. Or it gets to a point where I am left, which is okay with, because you know what? That means I didn't break my promise. But I've also grown a love for 2 other men in my life, but I have not said the words to. One of them, who I referred to as A in my previous lessons. Now, I didn't tell him because he didn't allow my love to grow to that level. It was like this beautiful flower that was on the cusp of becoming fully bloomed till it was put in the dark and slowly left to die, which it will eventually. As for the other, I didn't tell him because I didn't feel like I could keep the promise because he was showing me that it would be impossible to do so. Now, this was a very toxic situationship, which I hate using that word, but honestly is the best way to describe it. The basis of our situationship was that we had this amazing sexual chemistry. I mean, it was freaking off the charts. And it would have stayed that way, but when he would get drunk, he would often express these feelings for me, telling me that he loved me. But then the very next day, we would wake up and he'd be like, what are you doing in my bed? Or I don't remember saying anything to you last night, which honestly, he probably didn't because we also did a lot of drugs together, which definitely didn't help the situation. So I can't even say it was true love, but I was so conflicted by these emotions around him that I sought out answers from psychics. I thought maybe this guy's my soulmate because this isn't somebody I would typically love, yet I have these feelings. Now, let me make it clear. When I go to psychics, I never tell them what I'm going there for. I don't say, oh my God, can you tell me if this guy's my soulmate? I simply sit down, I say, tell me what you see. And then he would just always come up. And I'm also very well aware of cold reading aspects when it comes to psychics. So when I'm sitting there, I am like a blank expression. I say nothing. So the very first reading I got on him, of course, the psychic's like, oh, this person's your soulmate. And that was the first time anybody had said that to me because I'd gone to other psychics about other people I dated and nothing had ever been said like that. I mean, not even my ex-fiance. So I thought, well, that just confirms my intuition. But I was still so conflicted because the situation was so toxic. So I would go to another psychic and another one in hopes that someone would tell me something different. I mean, I think I probably went to over 20 psychics over a 2-year span dealing with this man. And every single one of them said, this person's your soulmate. So I felt like, oh my gosh, do I have to stick this out? Like, is this something we're supposed to be learning? And I thought, well, there's got to be some turning point where this love was going to bloom. So that's what you do if that person's your soulmate. And honestly, though, I mean, I was in my early 20s. Twin flames wasn't even talked about then. And like, I hadn't even experienced my Saturn return. Obviously, I was very naive about this. But then everything changed in one moment when I got my very last reading on him, because this psychic said, yep, this person's your soulmate. And I freaking snapped. There's no freaking way. No, this is not possible. I'm like, he hurts me all the time. And she looked at me and she said, honey, I said he was your soulmate. I didn't say he was the one. We have different soulmates in this lifetime. We have good soulmates and we have bad ones, or some say karmic ones. And I don't know, when she said that, I was like, oh, I'm done. And I just moved on. I mean, my whole belief system around soulmates changed in that moment simply because it made sense to me. We have to go back to the beginning of where this concept came from, especially in Western culture, which is from what I mentioned before, Plato's Symposium. Now, this is a story written by Plato that is the source that is often referred to as proof of soulmates and now also regarding twin flames. But I do wonder, like, how many people actually that reference this have read it? Because I did, like 3 times, in fact. And I feel like its context is taken out quite dramatically, or there's a misunderstanding and interpretation. Now, this story is not about a concept of soulmates. It's about love, or as the Greeks put it, Eros, the god of love. This story is a recounting of another story about 6 men that were hanging out at a drinking party or a symposium, and they each have to give a speech on why Eros, or love, should be praised more. Now, these men were celebrities of their times, and they are still spoken about today. And I'm going to do my best not to butcher these names, but they're a little challenging because it consisted of Thetis, Pausanias, Eryximenes, Aristophanes, and Agathon, and of course, Socrates. However, it's Aristophanes' speech that left the most impression on the concept of soulmates. Now, Thetis initiates discussion by proclaiming that love is fundamentally linked to virtue and honor. He argues that love compels a lover to perform brave and noble deeds to impress and win favor with their beloved akin to this heroic figure in mythology. This is the archetype of the romantic hero who braves these deeds for love, and it still remains very prevalent today. Now, Pausanias states that there are two types of love, the common and the heavenly. The heavenly is a love between an older man and a younger boy, leading to intellectual and spiritual development. Now, yes, he is referring to a sexual relationship, but this was very common during Greeks during this time, and it was just referred to as pedestry. This is like a boy that chooses to engage with an older man without reason other than to learn the man's wisdom, not having anything to do with like money or status. Now, obviously, this is an uncomfortable thought that would be in today's time, but this actually translates into platonic love. The love of a mentor or a teacher is a type of love that's respected. Next was Aristophanes, who is a physician in Plato's Symposium, and he broadens the concept of love beyond a mere personal relationship. He presents it as a principle that covers the balance and harmony of all things, embodying this universal form of love. According to him, a physician should use love as a guiding principle to maintain health and balance, promoting well-being in both the body and the soul. This suggests that love, in a broader sense, acts as an energy or a force essential for maintaining equilibrium and preventing illness. His view is not purely emotional, but rather technical and practical, grounded in understanding of how he views the world. Now, this aligns with the modern perspective where love is analyzed both scientifically, as we see this in studies of its biochemical impacts, and also spiritually in the ethos of love and light that underpins many contemporary spiritual movements today. Agathon, which is the host of the Symposium, portrays love as a divine muse that inspires courage, wisdom, and justice. He presents this idealistic version of love as embodying perfection, devoid of any flaws, and existing solely in the realm of goodness, beauty, and truth. To Agathon, love is the ultimate God. Now, his view resonates with today's notion of a flawless union that's often seen as idealistic, but in reality is rarely attainable. Now, as for Socrates, he introduces the teaching of Diotima, a wise priestess who revealed that love is not a god, but rather a demon, which they defined as a being that exists between mortals and immortals, not the demon that you think of by Christianity. Diotima teaches that love is characterized by the state of wanting and this pursuit of internal fulfillment. She describes a progression of love, beginning with this physical attraction akin to what we would call infatuation today. This initial stage has the potential to mature into a love for the form of beauty within itself, a higher, pure, abstract form that transcends more than physicality. This philosophical view of love aligns closely with the more modern, realistic perception of love, an infatuation that deepens over time into companionship love, enriched by these experiences and mutual growth, ultimately leading to this bond that surpasses the mundane aspects of daily life. And I believe this view aligns more with the concept of soulmates, but history has chosen Aristophanes' version time and time again. He was actually a comedic playwright, and he speaks of an ancient time where there were three genders, male, female, and androgynous. Humans were considered actual spiritual beings with 4 arms and 4 legs, shaped as a sphere, and we would just roll around with this formidable strength and ambition. But we grew arrogant and we decided to challenge the gods in order to take over the heavens, which led to our downfall because Zeus then split us in two to make us weak. Now, when he did that, Zeus also ordered Apollo to turn our heads to face each other so we could see what we had lost. Now, this left humans very distraught. All we could do was try to reconnect with our other half. We would just sit there and try to cling to them, hoping we would become one, that we would starve ourselves and neglect our human needs, which is killing us the race off one by one. Now, Zeus couldn't have this because humans provided the gods whatever they needed. So he turned to Apollo and said, hey, can you just turn their genitals from the back to the front and make it so they can reproduce? So that way they'll save the race and we'll give them some kind of pleasure. Now, as we grew, if we did come across our actual other half, we would meet them and become so immersed with each other in love and friendship that we never wanted to part from them. And even when the gods would ask, do you desire to be whole? If so, then you shall live your life as one. Even after death, you will remain together for eternity. And that wasn't even a question for them. Of course it was. It wasn't about what they desired. It was like a human need. Now, Aristophanes emphasizes this is what true love is, to be with our other half. But to learn that it must be appreciated because we're torn apart, not due to the gods, but because of mankind being arrogant and evil in their ways. And it destroyed what truly made us happy. So we must learn from our mistakes and value love or risk being split again and living a life alone, hopping along on one leg. It's a cautionary tale of allowing ego and fear and arrogance to undermine our relationships. But his story is taken in a literal expression for soulmates, but he was actually speaking metaphorically on the importance of love and the dangers of what happens when we take it for granted. And the fact that true fulfillment that comes through connecting with another love. We think we're not happy until we lose it, and then we realize how much it is of value. So you can see how the Symposium really has nothing to do with soulmates. It really is just the Greeks' view on love. So is it to say that soulmates don't exist? No, of course not. I mean, I can't really say one way or the other, right? But like I said, I do believe in soulmates. I believe people come into our lives and we need them, and some of them are here to stay and some of them aren't. But the ones that leave a lasting impression on our souls are the ones that we determine as soulmates, whether that impression is good or bad. Now, as for twin flames, I don't believe Aristophanes' narrative reflects the concept really at all, other than the idea of being split into two. But allow me to wrap up the soulmates first. To believe the concept of soulmates, you first need to believe in reincarnation, or the idea that the soul continues to exist in an afterlife. The two prominent figures in this field who were once firmly rooted in science but experienced some spiritual awakening are Brian Weiss and Michael Newton. Their experiences led them to realize that there is so much more to the universe than what science currently understands. Brian Weiss is a renowned psychiatrist and was a former head of psychiatry for the Mount Sinai Medical Center. Now, he was never really a spiritual person. He really only believed in the practical and logic. But he actually faced a very challenging case of a patient suffering from severe debilitating anxiety. And as a last resort, he tried hypnotherapy, which actually led the patient to accidentally going into a past life regression. And I'll include the book about this in the notes below, as well as information from Michael Newton. Now, even though that Weiss had this happen, he was still really skeptical of it. He didn't really believe that it was true until the patient revealed personal details about his personal life that she could not have personally known. Now, with each session, the patient's anxiety improved, and eventually she understood what her main source of trauma was actually stemming from, regards to a past life with her father. Weiss had conducted numerous past life regressions since then and teaches the practices to others so they may conduct it themselves. And it demonstrates this idea that our souls reconnect in every lifetime. Similarly, Michael Newton was a psychologist who was also firmly grounded in science, but he experienced a transformative moment. One of his clients was suffering from chronic physical pain that he could not help. Now, he had heard about hypnosis helping with this situation, so he thought he would try this technique with his patient, which the patient accidentally also slipped into this past life regression. The client had discovered that he'd been stabbed with a bayonet as a soldier, and I believe it was the French Revolution, which was causing this source of pain, because after that regression, the pain completely disappeared. Now, this experience changed Newton's view on everything, and he needed to know more. So throughout his career, he observed and hypnotized over 7,000 people. And he also founded the Newton Institute that teaches the practice of this. Now, he also discussed the concept of soulmates and referring to them as part of the soul tribe. According to Newton, we have a group of 5 to 6 people whom we reincarnate within every life. And within this soul tribe, we have one soul principal, someone who makes the most significant impact on us or whom we seem to connect with most deeply. Now, the connection is not necessarily romantic, but they can play various roles in different lives. Additionally, we also have soul acquaintances who aren't part of that initial tribe, but amongst our broader soul network, similar to the structure of our social connections we have in our lives today. Now, this understanding of soulmates resonated with me because that's what I was told 10 years prior to reading this book, and also because I've undergone multiple past life regressions. Now, these experiences help me understand the role certain people played in my life and how they contribute to my spiritual growth and development. So it's up to you to decide if you want to consider that many people with the same story as proof, even though some may argue that it's not technically proof because it's based on theories and relies on hypnosis, which is highly debated in terms of accuracy. If we were to base this entirely on science as the ultimate standard of proof, then there would need to be scientific studies that could suggest or confirm the existence of reincarnation or some form of afterlife that may be telepathically communing with us in a human form. Well, the University of Virginia of Medicine has a division in its neuroscience department called the Division of Perceptual Studies, which examines how our brain influences the more metaphysical aspects of the world, including reincarnation and near-death experiences. Ian Stevenson was a psychiatrist who founded this department, pioneering the study of reincarnation. He conducted close to 2,500 studies on reincarnation through children. Now, these are actual scientific studies. You can find them in journals and through the university. Stevenson interviewed these children to determine the legitimacy of their claims by verifying whether or not the past lives truly existed. And these children didn't merely just tell stories, they truly believed that they were these people. Many of these cases were confirmed, and there was no way that the child could have known about these lives unless they were truly reincarnated or communicating with the soul in the afterlife. The point of Stevenson's studies, though, was to aim to understand why do we behave the way that we do and what shapes our personalities, as there's gaps in biology that don't fully explain the factors that influence our behaviors. Stevenson actually believed that our DNA must have connections with reincarnation because these children often manifested some kind of injury or birth defect corresponding to how they died in life. For example, if somebody stated that they had lost their arm in their past life, then they were born with like a missing arm or some kind of defect to that. Or if they were shot or stabbed in a specific place, that they would have a birthmark resembling the injuries. And he could confirm this because he would see autopsy photos of the person's life before that, or he could even go to the morgue if the life was that recent. Now, this suggests that the body physically manifests as past life injuries, indicating a biological connection to reincarnation. It's important to note that as children, our brains are actually at a theta level until up to age 7, meaning the veil between this world and whatever spiritual source there is out there would be thinner. And this allows you to access memories or almost be tapped into this past life. So it's always crucial to consider what children believe because they can perceive things that adults cannot. And I can actually share a personal experience that kind of reflects this even as an adult. Because like I said, I've done a few life past regressions to understand the role that my ex had in my previous lives. Now, in every life except one, he has always been involved in my death some way by making sure that it happens, even though he never directly did it. In our last life together, which I believe was in the 1920s, he had hired someone to murder me. And that person ended up shooting me in the right side of my stomach, just below my kidney. Now, what's amazing is that when I was 16, I actually had to remove my right kidney due to a birth defect involving my urethra, which caused a kidney infection. Now, this defect was not known when I was born, but it occurred in the same location where I was shot in my past life. Now, to expand on this even further, I have believed for some time now that proving reincarnation is something that's actually meant to be as my mission in this life. And I am determined to do everything in my power to do so. And these experiences have only reaffirmed it. And for me, after reading Stevenson's book, has shown me that I'm not the only one that believes the answer lies in our DNA. Oh, now on top of that, I mentioned I study human design, and Ra also mentioned the importance of proving reincarnation before 2027. And everything else that Ra has predicted up to this point has come true. So I don't think it's a coincidence that all these things keep coming into my life as kind of a reminder. And I have also been told I'm not meant to do it alone, which leads me to the crowning topic of twin flames. Now, as I already mentioned, Elizabeth Prophet was the person that coined the term twin flames and brought it to a wider audience during the 60s and the 70s, except it never really took off. However, in the last 5 years, it started to reach the mainstream and be very, very popularized. Now, what's kind of ironic about this is that the prophet believed that the Aquarian age would be the time where many twin flame couples would reincarnate together to assist in the spiritual awakening of this planet. She taught that these couples would have a specific mission to anchor the divine love and light on earth and help us usher in this new era of peace and enlightenment. The ironic thing is that the age of Aquarius is the current astrological age that we're transitioning into, even though the exact start date has been debated. Her message, though, about twin flames differs quite a bit, though, from the narrative centered around it today. The modern version speaks of this twin flame journey between romantic couples. Now, the first stage of this journey is this initial meet that usually involves a flood of emotion or this intense connection and recognition that initiates some spiritual awakening. And that follows with this challenging phase that will test the strength of the connection, which will lead to emotional turmoil, seeding each of the twins' flames' fears and insecurities. One becomes the runner that withdraws, overwhelmed by the intensity of this connection, and the other one becomes the chaser, driven by this desire to keep the relationship together. Now, this stage ultimately leads to a break or separation to push personal growth and transformation. And this separation can last a day or 20 years. They don't really say when. Now, after this separation, they both come back together to surrender to the connection, understanding that what it was really truly meant for, and they reunite stronger than ever, which of course leads to this harmonious and healthy relationship. Now, this is a beautiful idea, and I'm not here to say that it's not possible, but I'm going to say that this is not the original narrative, but one that has shifted to compensate for the unhealthy relationship dynamics we experience today. I honestly don't know of any story where this situation has turned out this way. And if it has, please feel free to drop it in the comments because I really would love to hear about it. And I'm a deeply spiritual person, and I'm even idealistic in relationships, but I'm also well-versed in social psychology to see what this echoes. The initial stage is similar to limerence, and limerence is this intense infatuation to almost this obsession with another person without intention. It's like involuntary. Like you don't even know, why do I feel this way? I just do. And sometimes this is defined as this being this desire to want to be desired by someone that doesn't show you that interest back, but that's not actually always the case because they use Romeo and Juliet as a great example of limerence. Now, the second stage is this classic avoidant and an anxious attachment, or the fearful avoidant, the narcissist and the empath, the push and pull dynamics of an unhealthy toxic relationship. Then when one breaks, it makes one person left pining for the other, waiting for them to come back because they think this other person's their twin flame, or they stay together and they put up with these unhealthy dynamics or even abuse because they're waiting for them to have their spiritual awakening. I know this because I hear about it time and time again. I hear about the pain that people deal with when they think that someone's their twin flame and they're in this challenging phase. Hell, I even went through it myself. And I mean, I thought this person was my soulmate because I was told that. Now, again, I'm not trying to discount anyone's feelings or belief systems. I'm just wanting to reiterate the fact that this is very important to realize when they say, like, how do you know who your twin flame is? Well, if you're stuck in this phase of limerence or you've been attached to some kind of trauma bond, you're not going to truly know because you're going to have confirmation bias. Your mind is going to make you believe that this person is your twin flame because it's going to rationalize the experience. It's looking for the narrative to make sense of what's going on because there's so many holes of confusion that is yet to be filled. Now, as for Prophet's version of the twin flames, she actually does not mention this twin flame journey whatsoever. In fact, her narrative around it is quite different, which is why when I say I'm on the fence about the twin flame thing, I say maybe because I can relate to her concept a little bit more than the current one that's going on. Prophet says, yes, there can be some challenges. However, there's no this push and pull dynamic. There's no sacrificing your self-worth to be with this person. And there's no guarantee that you guys are going to end up together. According to Prophet, twin flames are two souls that were created from the same white fire body by God in the beginning. One was masculine, one was feminine. There must exist this polarity. According to Prophet, originally twin flames were in perfect harmony, but then they were separated by the misuse of free will and through negative karma, as she references the Garden of Eden as an example of this. Now, this story is a little bit similar to Aristophanes, but she was talking about the fact that it was two souls created in this flame. It was not about a person that was split apart into two, which is what the modern day version believes. But Prophet's main teaching on twin flames emphasizes the spiritual nature of this connection. It states that twin flames may not necessarily spend a lifetime together in the same physical embodiment. However, they can still communicate on some kind of spiritual level and support each other even when they're going through their karmatic relationships. The ultimate purpose is, the point is to come together to fulfill some spiritual mission. And that can only occur, though, when each person has undergone necessary personal transformation on their own. This personal transformation must exist prior to this connection, because that is what magnetizes the twin flames together. They have each gone through their personal transformation and they're ready to reunite. Now, she does state that there can be some karma that does need to be resolved between them. And so the relationship may not be in perfect harmony right away, but it will take work and dedication for both parties. It doesn't talk, though, about like, oh, you need to split and then get back together. She does mention in some cases, though, that one side of the twin flame may have progressed further emotionally and spiritually than the other. And if this difference is too great, then they are not meant to be together in this lifetime. Because the connection is not necessarily about love. It's rather about the mission you have together. And she doesn't mention any kind of immediate attraction is necessary. And her personal story doesn't even have that. Prophet herself was not the one who originally conceived the concept of twin flames. She just coined it. Now, it was actually her husband, Mark Prophet. When she had met him, she was 22 and he was 42. She went to him as a spiritual teacher. She had no interest in being with him romantically. But Mark had told her, well, she was his twin flame, and even though she was not aware of this concept. So she said, like, she needed some time to kind of sit with the idea and decided to go communicate with God to determine whether or not it was true. And after some reflection, she did realize that he was right and grew to love him over time. So the original concept, though, that she and Mark got from this was from archangels. That's why she discusses this masculine and feminine polarity in the context. It's because of the archangel and archaea connection. According to these teachings, archangels possess both masculine and feminine qualities. For example, Archangel Michael, one of the most well-known archangels, has a twin flame called Archaea Faith, and they have a specific mission together to provide courage and protection to others. Interestingly enough, like Archangel Shamel has a twin flame that I only recently found out is called Archaea Charity. Their mission is to bring gifts of love, compassion, and mercy, along with teaching self-love, how to strengthen relationships, how to heal from past traumas, how to provide harmony in relationships, and how to balance emotions and your self-worth. They see the good and potential in all things. And of course, I found this ironic because this is a recurring theme in my life. Now, I am not arrogant to think that I am an angel, because if I am an angel, I would be a very poor example of one. But I am often drawn to relationships where I can sense the other person's trauma and feel compelled to heal them. And I can always see the potential in people. And additionally, there's some peculiar coincidences as well about the characteristics of Archaea Charity. For instance, her day is Monday, which I happen to be born on. And her color is considered pink or ruby, which ruby is my birthstone. I mean, I don't really know what any of that means, but it's just really weird. But one thing to keep in mind is that Prophet also emphasized that twin flames are not meant to fix each other, that the relationship is not designed for one person to repair the other. Rather, twin flames need to focus on fixing themselves individually before coming together. And that point is so crucial. Prophet's way of how she explains it, it really is just sounds like to me soulmates that are designed to unite because they have a very specific mission in this world to make it a better place, kind of like soulmates on steroids. And you can have multiple soulmates, but there's only one twin flame, and it's meant to help you achieve ultimate purpose. To say that I have this specific mission in my life of proving reincarnation. This is some spiritual mission within itself, but I am determined to do this through science. Like I will prove it, physically prove it. But would this mean then that I have some kind of twin flame? I mean, obviously, I don't know. I was told that I was meant to do this with a partner. Now, maybe it doesn't have to necessarily be a romantic partner, but since I use astrology and human design to see how my life maps out, it does show in my chart that it most likely will be. And I'm not even suggesting that I know who this person is. I have considered the possibility that it could have been A, because astrologically, we were these two opposites that came together and we were meant to grow and evolve in the spiritual transformation. And he was supposed to help me with my purpose. That's what it said astrologically. But the storyline would line up more with Prophet's version than the current day version. Because when I met him, I didn't have limerence or this obsession or even infatuation. It was only after I felt that we connected on these like the intellectual and emotional and sexual level that I really did start to care about him. I mean, even now, after working through all these feelings and emotions in the last 4 months and the logical side of what's transpired, I still care about him because that's who I am. But I've also accepted the fact that the person I care about doesn't seem to truly exist. And someone I'll never see again. I mean, if I had believed like the twin flame kind of concept, like that would put me in a dangerous position. He was the one that expressed these doubts, I mean, about us being compatible long term. And I don't believe that really was a true reason. But in the end, ultimately, he was right because we aren't compatible. And I say this with such kindness and not to be rude, but I am more emotionally and spiritually evolved than he is. And I understand, like, I do intimidate men, but I'm not going to change who I am just because someone doesn't think we're compatible or dumb myself down because they feel threatened by my intelligence. I will not alter my belief system or a place that I come from, which, you know, despite to some could be a little wooey. I am based in logic and rationality. So it's going to take someone that is actually emotionally, spiritually, and intellectually evolved to be with someone like me. I know I'm at the level where I need to be at this point, and A did teach me a lot. But however, even before I met A, I knew I was still ready for one. I just didn't know that I still had baggage left to clear up. And I even expressed this to him. I told him I refuse to be with somebody that I have to fix. I can't do it anymore. I just want to have somebody at my same level, which he had said that he was. And what I mean by the same level, it's someone that's gone through their growth and is actively that works on their trauma. Because understand, I'm not perfect by any means. Like I make plenty of mistakes and I can be very challenging. I'm very well aware of that. But what matters is how you handle them. So you got to ask yourself when you are faced with a challenge, do you run from it or are you willing to embrace it? Do you look at challenges as opportunities for growth or do you use them as an excuse to cut and run? If you make mistakes or do something wrong, are you willing to take responsibility for it or do you pass the blame and then just live with the shame? Do you understand the value of love and appreciate the one giving it to you or do you use it for self-validation or to sabotage it out of fear? You should not put your life on hold for anyone, even if a psychic tells you to, or an astrological chart says you're destined to be together, or even if they're promising that they will change, yet their actions are not meeting their words. Trust me when I say that I have done this so many times in my life, it is not worth it. Now, after my ex, I swore to myself I would never do that again. I mean, and this actually, I think in a way that A and I were meant to break because honestly, if we hadn't parted, I most likely would have ended up staying in Denver or ended up in New York City because I would have wanted to stay with him. Like I said, when I make that promise, I stick to it. And I mean it. I mean, this is what happened when I had the opportunity to leave Seattle, but I didn't because I stayed due to a relationship, even though I know I wasn't supposed to. And to be honest, I've been very resistant to leave Denver. I mean, if I wouldn't have had that one psychic experience with the soulmate and learning all this stuff as I've grown, I probably would have been like, ooh, what if there's a chance? And I would have stayed, which means I would have delayed whatever purpose I meant to be in. I would have taken every obstacle that I've met in this past month or these past 4 months as a sign as it was I meant to stay and wait it out. But this time I didn't let those little obstacles stop me, even though it did come down to the wire because I literally just found a place yesterday with only 5 days before I have to leave. And honestly, it's fucking terrifying. This is the first time I'm taking this leap in my life by myself. I'm driving across the country alone, leaving a situation that never got resolved, and it fucking kills me. I mean, I cared enough about him to want to see the potential I saw in him to be true. I would rather leave things in peace and harmony than toxicity any day. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do. And you know what? One of the biggest things is like, no matter how I handled the situation, no matter how I felt about it, no matter how I feel about him, I'm not ashamed of any of it. Yeah, I may not have done things the best way and I let my trauma get in the way, but I took it as an opportunity to grow from it. Now I know what not to do in the future. And this is what makes me special because Despite all this pain that has caused me, this is the one thing that I have not changed. It's my ability to give love. And despite all these challenges I've had in my life, if I did want to look at it from the astrological aspect, by the end of this year, I am moving to the next phase of my love life, whatever that looks like. But it should be a more positive time for me. And with my next solar return, my ascendant moves into my descendant. All the things that I have been through, I am still not deterred by the idea that I'm not going to be able to find someone to love and that will love me back the exact same way. Every time this happens with me, of course, it knocks me down and I go through these dark moments, but I get right back up. And it's grown me into a better person each time. It's helped me work through my trauma, my triggers, and become more confident and push me towards whatever it is I'm meant to do in this world. And you better believe I will fucking do it. And I think that once I do, it will change the world because I'll be able to prove that you've spent more than one lifetime with another person. Because if reincarnation does exist, then maybe, just maybe, it will show how important love is and how it just transcends time and life itself. And maybe then people will be able to see the value of it instead of fearing it and bring us back to the place we need to be to make this world a better place. So you guys, this is my last lesson. I'm doing from Denver. And until next time, I will see you on the east side. Thanks, guys.